Imagine standing on a battlefield. You're surrounded by thousands of trained soldiers, the best your nation has to offer. But every single day, twice a day, a single man from the enemy army steps forward and brings your entire force to a standstill. That was the grim reality for the army of Israel. For 40 days, the Israelites and the Philistines were locked in a stalemate, camped on opposite hills with a wide valley separating them. And every morning and every evening, a Philistine champion named Goliath emerged. This wasn't just any soldier. He was a giant standing over 9 feet tall. His body was covered in heavy bronze armor, and he carried a spear so massive it was compared to a weaver's beam. His voice boomed across the valley, filled with scorn and mockery. He'd shout, "Why are you all lining up for battle? Choose one man to come down and fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be ours." The challenge was clear. A one-on-one fight to decide the fate of 2 nations. But no one in the Israelite camp moved. Not a single soldier. They were all frozen in terror. Even their leader, King Saul, a man known for his towering height and strength, did nothing. The fear was paralyzing. Day after day, Goliath's taunts chipped away at their morale, and a cloud of dread hung over the entire army. But far from the front lines in the quiet hills of Bethlehem, life went on as usual for a young shepherd named David. He was the youngest of 8 sons, too young to join the army like his older brothers. His days were spent in the fields, watching over his father's sheep. It was a humble, often solitary job, but it taught him patience, courage, and responsibility. One morning, David's father, Jesse, called for him. He handed David roasted grain and loaves of bread. "Take this food to your brothers at the camp," he said, "and see how they are doing." So David left his flock with another shepherd and set off on his journey. When he arrived at the edge of the battlefield, the scene was chaotic. The armies were shouting and preparing for another day of the standoff. As David found his brothers and gave them the food, a familiar dreaded voice echoed across the valley once more. It was Goliath, shouting his daily challenge. David watched as the Israelite soldiers, men he looked up to, shrank back in fear. He was stunned. He turned to the men standing nearby and asked, "What will be done for the man who defeats this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His words were filled with a fiery disbelief. It wasn't just about the insult to the army. To David, this was a direct challenge to God himself. The soldiers were taken aback by his boldness. Here was a young boy, not even a soldier, speaking with more courage than anyone in the entire army. David's questions didn't go unnoticed. Word quickly spread through the camp that a young shepherd was questioning why no one was fighting the giant. Soon enough, his words reached King Saul, who summoned David to his tent. Saul, a weary and worried king, looked down at the young man before him. He saw a shepherd, not a warrior. "You can't go out against this Philistine to fight him," Saul said, his voice heavy with doubt. "You are only a youth, and he has been a warrior from his youth." It was a logical assessment. Goliath was a seasoned, giant killing machine. David was a teenager who watched sheep. But David's confidence wasn't in himself. It was in his track record with God. He looked at the king and calmly replied, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." He then delivered the most important line. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul was taken aback. This wasn't arrogance, it was faith. A deep, tested faith that David had forged in the lonely pastures. In that moment, Saul saw something he hadn't seen in any of his soldiers: unwavering trust. Reluctantly, the king gave his blessing. "Go," he said, "and the Lord be with you." Saul then tried to give David his own royal armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. But when David put it on, it was heavy, bulky, and unfamiliar. He could barely move. He took it all off. "I cannot go in these," he said, "because I am not used to them." He wasn't going to fight Saul's battle or wear Saul's armor. He was going to fight his own way with the tools God had made him an expert with. Instead, David picked up his shepherd's staff. He walked to a nearby stream and chose 5 smooth stones, placing them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. With his sling in his hand, he walked out into the valley to face the giant. When Goliath saw David approaching, he roared with laughter. He looked at the young boy with his simple staff and sling and felt insulted. "Am I a dog," he bellowed, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods and promised to feed his flesh to the birds and the wild animals. But David was not intimidated. He didn't trade insults. His response was a declaration of faith that would echo through history. He said, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." With those words, the time for talking was over. David broke into a run, charging toward the Philistine line. Goliath, surprised by this boldness, moved forward to meet him. As he ran, David reached into his bag, pulled out one of his smooth stones, and fitted it into his sling. He began to whirl it, faster and faster, building momentum. With perfect timing and incredible skill honed over years of protecting his flock, David released the stone. It flew straight and true, a tiny projectile against a massive target. The stone struck Goliath squarely on the forehead, sinking into his skull. The giant staggered for a moment, his eyes wide with shock, and then crashed face first onto the ground. A stunned silence fell over the entire valley. The soldiers of both armies couldn't believe what they had just seen. The invincible giant was down. David didn't hesitate. He ran to the fallen Philistine, drew Goliath's own massive sword from its sheath, and ended the fight for good. When the Philistine army saw their champion was dead, their courage shattered. They turned and fled in a panic. A great shout rose from the Israelite camp as they surged forward, chasing their enemies and securing a victory that just moments before had seemed completely impossible. A battle that an entire army was too afraid to fight was won by a single shepherd boy who refused to be defined by fear. This story, of course, isn't just about a boy beating a giant. It's a powerful lesson about perspective. Everyone else on that battlefield saw an unstoppable giant. They measured Goliath against themselves and felt fear. David saw the same giant, but he measured him against an all-powerful God. And from that perspective, Goliath didn't seem so big after all. David's victory wasn't due to his own strength or military experience. It was the result of his faith. He didn't let the world's definition of strength dictate his actions. He trusted that his obedience to God, his courage, and his simple, practiced skill were more than enough. He used what he had, and trusted God to do the rest. The story of David and Goliath reminds us that the giants in our own lives can seem overwhelming. They might not be 9-foot warriors, but they can be just as intimidating. Giants of fear, doubt, anxiety, addiction, or impossible circumstances. They stand in front of us, mocking our hopes and paralyzing us with their size. But this ancient story teaches us a timeless truth. Victory doesn't always go to the biggest, the strongest, or the best equipped. Sometimes it goes to the one who sees the challenge from a different perspective. It belongs to the one who steps forward in faith, however small they may feel, and trusts in a power greater than themselves. That is why this story has been told for thousands of years. Not because of the giant who fell, but because of the faith that stood tall. It's a reminder that with the right perspective and a little bit of courage, we too can face our giants. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that explores these powerful themes. We'll see you in the next one.